Before you begin investing, you have to set a goal. For you to continually contribute to something that you're not going to benefit from for the next 20, 30, or even 40 years, you have to have a reason. For most people, their reason for investing is to retire. But calculating what their retirement number is isn't always as clear cut as it may seem. The further you are from retirement, the more difficult it is for you to determine what your retirement number needs to be. It's hard enough to plan for something that's going to happen next week, let alone something that's 20 or 40 years away. But the only way that this investing thing works is for you to have a target. And what this target is going to tell us is not only how much do you need to be putting away each month, it's also going to dictate what you need to be invested in to hit that goal. The easiest way that I've found to calculate what someone's retirement number is to base it off a percentage of their final gross salary. And the goal here is to replace that certain percentage. Now, for me and the younger clients that I work with, there are two percentages that we use as our target. We have 70% of the final gross pay and 50% of the final gross pay. In this video, I'm going to show you not only why I chose those two percentages, but I'm going to show you how to go about calculating what your retirement number should be. And I'm also going to show you what it's going to take to get there. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Financial Wellness Planning. My name is Derek Coffey, and I'm the founder of FWP. And my methods of determining what someone's retirement number isn't as arbitrary as it may seem. Whether you choose 70% or 50%, it's going to come with stipulations. It's also going to be determined by how much you can afford to invest, as well as the amount of risk that you're willing to take on. And the option that you choose is also going to dictate the financial decisions that you make between now and the time you actually retire. But the first option that we're going to look at is replacing 70% of your final gross salary. And this is going to be the more expensive option of the two, naturally. But replacing 70% of your final gross income is going to apply if you anticipate taking debt with you into retirement. If you know that you're going to have to continue making debt payments to stay current on those debts, then we need to ensure that you have enough income coming in to cover those payments. Also, if you're under the age of 50, I want you to at least consider the 70% option. And the reason this is because if you're under the age of 50, the likelihood of Social Security actually factoring into your retirement plan is very little. So if you're younger than age 50 or you do anticipate carrying debt with you into retirement, then replacing 70% of your final gross pay may be the right option. But the reason that I settled on 70% as option number one is because you already live on less than 100% of your gross salary. In all actuality, you probably live on close to that 70% number. And if we break it down by the deductions that come out of your paycheck, you'll understand what I mean. You already pay 7.65% into FICA, or Social Security and Medicare. If we assume that you have an effective federal tax rate of 10% and you live in a state that collects income taxes like I do, then that's an additional 15% that's coming out of your check. Then, if you contribute 5% into your employer-sponsored accounts or a 401k, then you're living on just over 72% of your gross salary. So getting to retirement and replacing 70% of your final gross income makes no material difference in your lifestyle. So how do we calculate what your retirement number is? Well, we have to do a little bit of math. So if we have a married couple and we assume that they bring in $100,000 a year gross, the first thing we need to do is we need to inflate those wages to the time that they're going to retire. We're going to assume that they're 25 years old and that they have a target retirement age of 65. Over the course of their career, we're going to factor in a 3% annual raise. If we put all of that information together, we can determine what their final gross salary is going to be. So over the course of 40 years, their $100,000 of income is going to turn into $326,203. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take that figure, multiply that by 70% to determine how much income we need to receive from their investments. So if we multiply their final gross income by 70%, that replacement number is $228,342 per year. Now, to figure out how much we need in investments, we're going to take that figure and divide it by 4%. If we do that math, the final number that they need to have in their investment accounts is $5.7 million. Now, before you click away and say, hey man, you're crazy, it's not as crazy as it may seem. For reference, $1 million in 1984, or 40 years ago, would have had to have grown to over $3 million in 2024 to have this same purchasing power. So even though you're looking at this and you're saying, man, 5.7 million, why would you need that much money? With the way that inflation is going and the cost of living, that 5.7 is going to be a necessity. You're going to need a significant amount of wealth if you want to replace 70% of your final gross pay. Now keep in mind, you pick the 70% option if you plan on taking debt with you into retirement. So if you don't plan on taking debt with you into retirement, or you plan on making prudent financial decisions from now until the time you retire, then you don't have to worry about a number this large. Instead, we're going to look at the 50% option. The 50% option is going to be meant for those that don't carry debt with them into retirement. We've already figured out that you're living on 72.35% of your gross pay. But if we assume that an additional 25% of your pay goes towards your debt payments, then you're living on just over 47% of your gross pay. So replacing 50% of your income in retirement is quite reasonable. It actually gives you a couple of percentage points to go and enjoy your retirement. So if we use the same example, the couple bringing in $100,000 a year, they get 3% raises over the course of the next 40 years. Their final salary at retirement is still $326,203. Instead of multiplying that by 70%, we're going to multiply it by 50%. And that's going to reduce the amount of income that they're going to need. So if we multiply by 50%, that leaves them with $163,101 that they need to bring in every single year to live. We're going to divide that by the 0.04 like we did earlier, and that's going to make their retirement number just over $4 million. Again, it's not a small number by any means. It's quite the battle to get to $4 million, but it is $1.7 million less than the 70% replacement option. So how are we going to get there? So if we assume that our couple decides to use the 70% replacement option, we can determine how much they need to set aside each month to hit their target. As you can see on your screen, at a 5% average annual rate of return, our couple would need to put aside almost $4,000 a month to hit that $5.7 million target. As the rate of return increases, the amount that they need to put aside each month decreases. So if they're able to invest in a way that they can get 8% on their investments, then they only need to set aside $1,800 a month. Now, the one thing we're not taking into account is any money that they're putting into an employer-sponsored account. When we came up with the replacement options, we assumed that we were putting 5% into an employer-sponsored account. Well, if our couple is putting in 5% per year into their employer-sponsored accounts and they're receiving a 5% company match, then they're putting in $833 a month. $5,000 from them, $5,000 from their employer. You divide that by 12, it's $833. And what you can see is the amount that they need to contribute additionally starts to go down. So with the 70% option at a 5% rate of return, it's $3,100. If they're able to get up to 8%, it's just over $1,000. Now, if they look at their budget and they determine that they don't have enough room to save that $1,000 a month, then that takes the 70% replacement option off the table. This means that they have to change the way that they operate their finances. From now until the time they retire, they need to ensure that any debt that they take on during that time has a plan to have it paid off before they retire. Now, because they've accepted the fact that the 70% replacement option isn't going to work, we can look at the 50% option. So if $1,000 didn't work in the 70% replacement, then it's not going to work in the 50%. So even if they can afford the $869 per month, their budget is what's going to force them into investing in a way that could get them 7% as their average rate of return. If the $869 doesn't work, then they're going to have to invest in a way that's going to get them to 8%. And that's the point of knowing your retirement number. By doing the work and determining what our sample couple's numbers were, we were able to figure out that the 70% replacement option wasn't going to work because that $1,000 a month didn't fit into their budget. Instead, they had to look to the 50% option because there were two selections that were under that $1,000 per month. Now, if they were only able to contribute $479 a month, then that was going to force them into a portfolio that might return 8%. That might be a little more risky than what they would prefer, but based on their situation, that's what they were forced to do. This is the importance of knowing your goal before you even get started. It's going to make it easier for you to stay on task. And then as you find more room in your budget to save more, you can begin reducing that risk. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. If this video or any of the other videos that I've put out has provided you value, then hit that subscribe button. If you know someone that hasn't started investing yet and they just don't know where to start, then send this video to them. Maybe it'll help them out. But I thank you so much for tuning in. I'll talk to you soon.